Jen and Cam are two funny ladies who like to talk about murder, mass murder, murder-suicide, serial killers, spree killers, thrill killers, contract killings, honor killings, and a whole lot of other shit too heinous for me to list here. If you're disturbed by this sort of content, you may want to listen to something else. And if you're a child trying to listen to our true crime podcast, well, you better ask your mama.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, Cam. How are ya?
It's rainy.
It's
It's
chilly.
one of my favorite days of the year.
I know. It's exciting. I can't wait to, after we're done here, I'm going to go put on my comfy clothes and maybe
Holiday
have my husband
music?
build a fire. Yeah, we do have to decorate the tree.
See, that's what I was thinking.
I know. But before we do all this, we have to get through this very gruesome episode that I have.
Whoa. Okay.
It's pretty gruesome. Content warning, child, deals with children. Totally understand if you don't want to listen to it. I get it, but it's...
Move on down the line.
Yep.
You know, there'll be another one next week.
Yep. The last one before we start our 12 Nightmares Before Christmas.
I know.
So, all right, you ready?
I'm ready.
In April of 1973, on Friday the 13th, Elsie Ralph was at work bartending at a local pub called the Punch Bowl Tavern, located in the Rainbow Hill district of Worcester, England. She was 23 years old and had given birth to 3 children within 4 years. There was Paul, who was 4, Dawn, 2, and Samantha, who was 9 months. So, as one might expect, she might have enjoyed her occasional evening shift at the pub, just to give her a short break maybe and to earn a little extra cash.
Mm-hmm.
Her husband, Clive Ralph, was a lorry driver during the day, and together they lived in a 2-bedroom brick home with their children in a safe and cozy cul-de-sac surrounded by friendly neighbors. In fact, Elsie noted that the neighborhood was full of happy, happy children. As if 5 people in a small home wasn't enough, they had a boarder who lived with them. His name was David McGreavy. He was a friend of Clive's, and with the money Elsie earned at the pub and the rent from McGreavy, the couple had hoped to move into a larger place soon, and the future was looking pretty bright for them. At closing time, when Elsie needed a way home from her shift at the pub, Clive left the kids with David, their boarder, their lodger. The children knew him well, as he had lived with them since before the youngest, Samantha, was even born. McGreavy played with the kids often, and he often cooked Sunday dinners for the entire family. McGreavy's family and neighbors all commented on how much he loved children, and Elsie would say that he used to bop Samantha on his knee for hours. However, there had been an incident on the evening before when Elsie came home to find Samantha's cheek bruised and her mouth bleeding and her arm obviously injured. She took the baby to the hospital, and a doctor made a note of Samantha's medical record, quote, query battered baby. It's not known what conversation was had between the Ralphs and David over what happened with Samantha. And it's quite possible that David had what seemed to them like a plausible explanation for Samantha's injury. Accidents do occasionally happen. And the truly tragic part was there was a miscommunication at the hospital. Samantha was never supposed to be released from their care until further inquiry could be made with the parents about the injury, but unfortunately, she was released. So Clive and Elsie, knowing their children were in good hands with David McGreavy, and Clive, knowing he wasn't going to be very long, headed out to get his wife from work. And as usual, when Elsie closed the bar, she and Clive would sit and have a beer before locking up and heading out. And it was one of the few moments that the young couple could steal for themselves. There was a chill in the air as Clive and Elsie went home. Worcester, located in the Midlands of England, is damp and cool in April. The couple chit-chatted the 2 miles home from their house in the sleepy suburban neighborhood. But as soon as they turned the bin into Gillam Street, the relaxed and comfortable mood turned to dread and unease. There were police cars all up and down their street. A knot formed in Elsie's stomach as she realized the police weren't just on her street. They were at her house. As the couple approached, they were met by police informing them that they could not enter the home. Elsie panicked and begged to know why. The police officer gravely told them, quote, "There's been a murder." The police would not immediately share with the couple exactly who had been murdered or the details of the crime. Elsie became hysterical, and an ambulance medic gave her a sedative. The couple was ushered to the police station immediately. There, after being questioned, Clive and Elsie were told that all 3 of their children had been murdered. Paul, aged 4, Dawn, aged 2, and Samantha Jane, aged 9 months. They were all dead. Elsie says she remembers very little after that. When the police had arrived at the home on Gillum Street, they had no ideas what horrors awaited them. They had been called to the house by neighbors who reported loud noises from the residents. And domestic disturbances calls were not unusual to the area, especially among the young couples who had lots of children with limited space and limited income, and tempers often ran high in those situations. Unfortunately for the officers who responded that night, a simple domestic disturbance was not what they got. Upon entering the flat, they knew immediately that something horrible had happened. Authorities could tell that it was obvious that children had lived in the home by the mess of the bottles and the cradles and the toys strewn all about. But it was equally obvious that horrible acts of violence had occurred. The thing that stood out the most was that among the toys and bottles and all the blood spatter and blood-soaked floors was that there were no sign of the children anywhere. Police continued to search the house, and when they made their way into the backyard, they found all 3 tiny humans impaled on the wrought iron spikes of the garden fence. One of the officers couldn't help himself and vomited at the crime scene. Other officers shook in horror. Their minds went blank at first. Were they really seeing 3 small mutilated children? Who would do such a thing? DCI Robert Booth would later go on to say, quote, "I have never known a more brutal murder in all my life." This makes me sick.
No words.
Eventually, the question that loomed larger and larger was, where was the babysitter? That lodger guy, the guy who cooked Sunday dinners for the family. Where was David McGreavy? David Anthony McGreavy, for all intents and purposes, grew up in a normal family. The second eldest of 6 children, born in Southport, Lancashire in 1951. David moved around a lot as a child because his father was a sergeant in the British Army. He faced the normal trials of a military family, making friends only to be whisked away with the stroke of a pen. According to his family, his happiest time was when they were stationed in Germany, when he and his siblings would picnic and bike in the woods and partake of an occasional weekend skiing. His mother, Bella, said that she almost had no problems with him, except for the one time when his family was living in Cardiff. He did steal money from her and to make a trip to go to Liverpool. David did not seem to hold any grudges against his nomadic upbringing, and in 1967, when he was just 16, he quit school and entered the British Royal Navy, determined to be a lifelong military man like his father had been. However, his father was against it, as he didn't think David had the constitution or the dedication for it. Of course, at the age of 16, David was just a kid. Still, David joined up and was assigned to work in the mess hall on the HMS Eagle and was immediately exposed to older sailors and their lifestyles. It was at this point in his life he also embarked on his troubled relationship with alcohol. According to his fellow sailors, quote, "David was a rather arrogant young man. He always had to have the last word. He had quite a cocky attitude, and he was subject to quite a few disciplinary procedures." While in Pembrokeshire, or Pembrokeshire, I think it's Pembrokeshire, David saw his name written in the Chief Petty Officer's book, and there's no context given to it. It was just his name. So David assumed, on no basis whatsoever, that his job was about to be changed, and this angered him. And so he started to drinking, and he drank until he was quite inebriated. Upon showing up for his shift later that day, his coworkers noticed that he was agitated, angered easily, and he was obviously drunk. After his shift, he made his way to the quarters of an officer where he threw a lit cigarette in the trash bin, causing it to catch fire. He watched it burn for a while, and then he rang the fire alarm at 2:30 in the morning. Now, at first, He said he just happened to be walking by and saw a fire. But then he said he accidentally dropped the cigarette into the bin, not realizing it was trash. The naval authorities saw through that story and court-martialed him for negligence, and he was sentenced to 90 days detention. His commanding officers made him undergo a psychiatric evaluation at the time. His parents were never given an explanation for David's behavior, and they were not even given a copy of his psych evaluation. In fact, that evaluation has never been made public. However, one doesn't need to be a psychiatrist to see that when under the influence of alcohol, David could not envision the consequences of his actions in the moment. Either that or he just didn't care about what those consequences would be. After returning from a tour of the Far East and settling in Portsmouth, David began a pen-pal relationship with a woman named Mary. They wrote back and forth from January of 1971 to April of that year, exchanging long, affectionate letters. Well, the couple finally met in person in May, and David was besotted. He loved her and proposed marriage within a week of actually meeting her. And they spent quite a lot of time together. In June and July of that year, while David was determined to have a big wedding and begin life with Mary, Bella, David's mother, wasn't entirely happy with the situation. Mary, it seemed, had some significant health issues, and Bella, McGreavy, thought Mary may have been over-exaggerating her illness.
Oh.
Yeah, that's another red flag right there.
Mm-hmm.
In August of 1971, David showed up on his parents' doorsteps, bag in hand, and simply said, "I'm out." His career in the Navy was over, and David gave no explanation as to why. So now he had no job, no direction. His lifelong dream of a career in the Navy was shot down, and he became a bit unmoored. He began to focus more and more on Mary and the wedding. At that point, Mary was ready to get married and didn't really care about all that fancy bells and whistles of a huge ceremony. But once again, David could not bend. He was determined to have a large wedding and reception. Just tunnel vision and severe determination to have what he wanted, in combination with the disapproval of David's mother, gave Mary pause. Good girl. She was picking up those red flags that he was dropping. On New Year's Eve, Mary called off the wedding. Mary was good for Mary. 1972 found McGreavy living with his parents and completely ungrateful for their help. He refused to do any chores or pay any rent. He just drank and sulked. Unable to deal with him any longer, his parents kicked him out of the house. One day, David approached his friend Clive and asked if he could stay with him until he got on his feet, and Clive agreed, but David had to pay £6 a week in rent. £6, could you imagine?
That's still pretty good.
Which meant he had to be gainfully employed. So David agreed to all this, and he moved into the 2-bedroom apartment with a family of 4, sharing an upstairs room with their oldest son, Paul. Soon after he moved in, Clive and Elsie brought home their newly born baby girl, Samantha, and the 2 daughters slept in their parents' bedroom. Very tight living quarters.
Well, you do what you got to do.
Yep. Earlier, on the evening of the murder of the Ralph children, David McGreavy had met a friend at the Bucks Hill pub, where he drank 7 imperial pints of beer. The 2 men had played cards and darts, and all seemed well with McGreavy, although there was a small altercation that took place to leaving the pub after McGreavy had put out a cigarette on his friend's beer.
Oh.
Yeah, that's nice. Clive Ralph picked McGreavy up from the pub and took him home, where he would watch over the children while Clive retrieved Elsie from work. McGreavy would be alone with the children for only an hour. The fact that David was inebriated didn't seem it was like that big of a problem, since the children would be asleep anyway.
I don't know about that.
At some point between 10:15 and 11:15, baby Samantha Jane began to cry for her bottle, as babies do. David wasn't an idiot. It's not as if he'd never had to deal with a crying baby before. So why was it on this night his reaction to her crying was so outrageous and egregious? It's never been determined. But instead of just giving her the bottle, he choked her and bashed her head.
Oh.
The autopsy would show that Samantha died of a skull fracture. And for some reason, known only to McGreavy, as he had never even given a meaningful explanation or a reason why any of his actions on that night, or a reason for any of his actions on that night, he decided he had to kill the other two as well. And it's not as if either of the children witnessed McGreavy kill their sister, but still he felt it just needed to be done. He slit the throat of 2-year-old Dawn with a razor he retrieved from the bathroom and then strangled 4-year-old Paul with a wire. Had David McGreavy stopped there, the crime may have faded into obscurity, but he didn't. He went into the basement and retrieved a pickaxe and proceeded to mutilate the bodies. At one point, he decided that the children should probably be buried, but he couldn't do it. And instead, in an act that showed all disregard for his actions, he took them outside in the backyard and impaled their bodies on the spikes of the fence, and then left. He just left the home. Now, impaling the children seemed to some people as a statement, as if he was proud of what he had done, and as if he was daring anybody to do anything about it. But McGreavy was found and arrested by police at 3:50 a.m., walking on a street near the Ralph's home. Upon being approached by the police, he feigned ignorance. "What's this all about?" he asked. As one would expect, McGreavy denied responsibility, but several hours later said, quote, "It was me, but it wasn't me." He then described in graphic detail what he had done to the children, and he confessed, quote, "I put my hand over Samantha's mouth, and it went from there. It's all in the house. Oh, on Paul, I used a wire. I was going to bury him, but I couldn't. I went outside and put them on the fence. All I could do is hear kids, kids, kids." McGreavy's only explanation for the murder was that the baby would not stop crying. Apparently, giving Samantha her bottle just never occurred to him, or while not the ideal solution, even leaving the kids in the house while he sat in the front porch would have been a better solution for that murder. Better solution than murder. Pressed further on why he killed 3 innocent children, his reply was chillingly nonchalant. Quote, "This is what I've been trying to figure out."
What? That's what he said?
He had no idea why. He's been trying to figure out why he killed the children.
I think he obviously... He had some sort of psychotic break.
He was drunk. He has anger issues, it sounds like.
Really angry, and it all came out.
Horrible. On June 28th, 1973, McGreavy appeared in court wearing a navy blue boiler suit, head down, and pleaded guilty to the murders of all 3 Ralph children. The courtroom was packed. Young mothers stood outside the court with their children in carriages. Authorities were very concerned that an attempt would be made on McGreavy's life.
I could see that.
However, the hearing lasted only 8 minutes because McGreavy pleaded guilty and there was no defense plea, no motive, and no case of diminished responsibility. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, having to serve a minimum of 20 years, at which time he would be eligible for parole. Did you get that? 20 years.
Yes.
Life, but you have to serve. Yeah.
It's
parole.
different.
He gets parole. I'm telling you, the parole thing gets me. Clive and Elsie Ralph never entered the home on Gilliam Street ever again. They were not allowed to view the children's battered bodies. And there's only one surviving photo of the children, and it sits on Elsie's dresser to this day. As one might expect, Elsie Ralph fell into a deep depression after her children were murdered. She was prescribed a heavy dose of sedatives and antidepressants to begin with, but about 6 months after the murder, she tried to end her own life by swallowing all the pills at one time. Her husband, Clive, just couldn't take it anymore, and the two divorced. While Elsie and Clive tried to go on and rebuild some sort of life for themselves, albeit separately, David McGreavy settled into prison life as a child murderer. In 1975, he suffered a severe physical assault by fellow inmates, leading to him spending much of his time in a segregation unit for his own safety. In 1994, he was transferred to Category D open conditions within the prison system, but when fellow prisoners there learned of his past crimes, he was once again a victim of serious assault, which I don't.
Well, I don't. I mean, It's ironic that you're put somebody in protective custody who did not protect those babies.
People who do something like this to children, I have at them. That's what I've got to say. McGreavy stayed in a bail hostel in Liverpool while he was preparing for a parole hearing. It was soon discovered that he had been allowed to walk around Liverpool unsupervised in preparation for his release from Ford Prison in Arundel, West Sussex.
What? What do you mean he got to walk around?
Well, in the UK, when prisoners are being considered for parole, they are allowed some freedoms outside the prison to try to help them assimilate back into society before their release.
No.
And it was rumored that somebody within the prison system leaked the information to the press that McGreavy was allowed out of prison during the day to walk freely among the people and could possibly be eventually released into the general public. The results was photographs all over the front page of the newspapers showing an older, balding McGreavy staring down photographers while freely walking around the people in the community. This led to the MP of Worcester to ask the courts that McGreavy be permanently banned from his city. He's not well liked, which is understandable.
Could you imagine if you were familiar with him and you had, say, you're out shopping with your children and you saw him?
No. In 2009, McGreavy underwent his 7th review hearing. His legal team challenged the then Secretary of State's refusal to recommend their client be transferred to open prison. McGreavy was told he must remain under closed prison conditions. However, David McGreavy's legal team requested that he be given an anonymity status. They referred to 4 sections of the Human Rights Bill in the UK to warrant this request. They are as follows. Article 2, the right to life. Article 3, the right to protection from ill treatment. Article 5, the right to liberty and security. Article 8, the right to privacy and a family life. Quincy Whitaker, McGreavy's lawyer, insisted that if fellow prison inmates learned of his identity through the media, there was a serious likelihood of a serious attack. The judge agreed and imposed a ban on naming McGreavy within the prison system to protect him from other prisoners. He could now only be referred to as Prisoner M, the letter M.
Ew. You know what I'm going to say right now. I get all that and I understand it, but all of those rights that he's now been given, those poor babies and their parents did not have those rights. So I know it sucks. There's a reason that in the prison system, they take care of certain...
I know, but there's still, once you're in the government's hands, you have the right to be protected no matter what a shit stain you are. And excuse my language, but still. For some, chief among them, Elsie Ralph, David McGreavy forfeited his rights as a human when he butchered 3 children. And what's more, he was given a minimum of 20 years. Many felt that this should be a minimum of 20 years per child, which I'm not in disagreement with.
I was just going to say the three kids, did their ages even equal 20?
No.
I don't.
No,
it didn't. So they
didn't even equal 10.
It's insane, is what that is.
These were 3 defenseless children murdered and mutilated by someone they trusted. And how could parole even be a possibility for him? And why was any consolation given to him at all? Right? In fact, many people questioned the whole drunken rage theory altogether. In most cases of rage killings that involved more than one victim, the method was usually the same for each of them. But the fact that David used different methods on each child suggests to some that he had time in between these killings to consider what he was going to do next. And that implies some kind of premeditation. After 4 years, his anonymity status was revoked in 2013. And once again, the threats on his life ensued. Fellow inmates urinated on his bed and speared feces on the walls of his cell. In December 2018, following a parole hearing, the parole board decided that David McGreavy had, quote, changed considerably over the last 45 years and legally cleared him for release on parole. The fact that the justice system can release anybody from prison because they no longer deemed a threat to society sort of dismisses that whole idea that a person is supposed to pay for the crimes that they've committed. David McGreavy is now a free man.
No.
Elsie, the mother of 3 children, is devastated all over again and continues to live in her own personal prison as a result of David McGreavy's actions. As Elsie points out, many people in the British prison system have committed far less gruesome crimes than McGreavy, and they've not been paroled. So what makes McGreavy so special? He has never shown an ounce of remorse for his crimes. David Anthony McGreavy will be on license for the rest of his life and subjected to certain conditions, including a curfew and a tag, and faces a return to prison if he fails to comply. In a rather hollow statement, the Ministry of Justice stated, quote, "We understand that this will be extremely distressing for the family of David McGreavy's victims, and our thoughts remain with them." Their thoughts. That's so nice that they're thinking so. Elsie said in an interview, quote, "I remember the 3 little white coffins at the funeral and being in the crematorium with my parents, but that's all. My life had become a blur of terrible pain and the drugs I was prescribed. I lost my children, my husband, my home, my sanity, everything because of him. I won't find peace until he's dead and I'm laid to rest with my babies." Elsie did eventually remarry, but she never had any more children. And in fact, she said she found it difficult to be around children from the day hers were brutally and senselessly murdered by a person they trusted. He's free.
I'm going to tell you something right now. Jennifer. If my whole life was taken away like that, I would have, and I know it's not healthy, so I don't want to hear it, I would have one mission in life, and that would be to make his living moments on the rest of this earth time hell. That's it. I don't, your babies are gone. Your marriage is done. You lost your, what else is there? What are you going to do? Take me to jail and put me in jail for a couple weeks for harassment? He killed all my babies.
I might not be in jail for harassment. It might be something stronger. At least hire somebody out. No,
And he changed in prison.
No.
Show me one prisoner that has not found God, found Allah, changed different. They've all changed. None of them are the same. And I mean, part of that is because you do spend a long time in there.
And it almost makes me think that they were tired of just dealing with him and the shit that he had to go through. You know what I mean? Like protecting him. You know, like, he's a pain in the ass. Let's get rid of him.
I mean, again, and I brought this up earlier, you know, Whitey Bulger was on the run for all those years, all that stuff. Then real swiftly, they transferred him to a prison he wasn't supposed to be in, and within 3 hours, he's dead. Now, you don't think that was on purpose? Come on now. So, just saying. There's other ways that things can be solved.
All people to let go, somebody, he had absolutely no remorse. He never.
I thought he just lost it, but it seems more like, I don't know. That's not losing it.
It would be one child.
Yes,
but then to go and just do and just murder. I mean, he mutilated. I can't even talk about it. But he
and you know what? He would have
didn't
been better
just
off.
In a fit of anger kill one, or in a fit of anger kill all 3. He purposely did horrible things to them after they were killed.
See, and how could he ever be free? Ever?
All within an hour.
Just certain people.
He got in a fight with his friend. It ended with him throwing a cigarette in the drink or something like that.
Then you know what you do? You just walk away from the house and leave the 3 babies there by themselves.
You do. When the baby's crying, you go sit outside on the porch. You do whatever. You don't. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, that's a terrible story.
It is horrible. My apologies.
God.
But
people, And I know other prison systems. I know that we in America, it's pretty harsh, and it's also unfair many times, over which we're not going to talk about today. But there are certain people that I believe deserve, at the minimum, life, like you did, and he would be one. I'm sorry, you never get to walk again as a free man. Sorry.
No, I wouldn't even want to.
Could you
I know
imagine?
you're not supposed to do cruel and unusual punishment, but some people deserve to be.
Well, and like,
in my opinion.
Here in the States, if you're a sexual predator or sexual offender, you have to register. So, for instance, if somebody moved next door to me that had a record for sexual offenses, I have to be told. Now, I wonder if it's like that over there. How would you like your neighbor? Oh, that's the guy that killed 3 young babies. That's him. He's my neighbor. Do they tell you?
For no reason.
Do they? I wonder if they have to tell. I would think they would, but maybe not.
So, I don't know.
Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Just got a little fired up over that one.
It's very distressing. It's very distressing. But I was upset that I'm sure it was all over the UK that he was released, but I just wanted to make it brought up again because it's interesting how different how everything is. For instance, and this is a segue sort of, but so on, I believe it's Tuesday, Kevin Johnson, an inmate in the state of Missouri, is supposed to be put to death, and his daughter asked to go and witness it. She's 19. She's 19, and they don't want her to do it.
And the judge denied that request because you're supposed to be 21 years old. And what do you think about that? Well, I think in theory that's fine. Like because anybody can go. I can apply to go see somebody put to death. It doesn't matter who it is. But I think in that circumstance, I mean, I have my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
Well, he was sentenced to death at 19 for killing a police officer, right?
Correct. And he admitted it. He admitted it all.
He admitted, exactly. I kind of feel that maybe they don't want people to see to humanize the guy, maybe. That he's got a family and she's young and I don't know.
She has a baby too.
Yeah.
I just think that
hey, you know what? She's old enough to go to war. If she wanted to go to war right now, she could. She's 19. You have to be 18 to go to war.
I think the harm that it would cause not being there for your only living relative to see them pass away, even though he did a heinous thing, I think that's going to cause more harm on her than it would to go. She gave an interview saying, like, this is my only living relative minus my baby. And if he had cancer, I would be at his bedside and hold his hand until he passed on. And so that's what she's trying to equate this to.
And I get that. I personally couldn't be in the room with that happening. I couldn't take it. I would have severe problems for the rest of my life for watching that. But I think she is old enough. And I think if she really wants to be there, I think she should.
I do too. That was
I really point. Do. But I think it has something to do with maybe making him human instead of some monster, humanizing him.
Could be. I'm not sure
for it.
I know that laws and crimes against police officers are always worse than like a layman, you know. But he did admit it. He totally said, "I did it." He's never denied it.
Yeah. When starting this case, I wasn't the details. I didn't quite.
Sometimes there's little things in it that we've covered cases where there's mental illness or there is severe drug use, and we know that drug use does deform the brain. It causes brain damage. So all of that, in a way, not that it makes sense because we all know none of this makes sense, but you can kind of say, okay, he had brain damage or mental illness, but this guy
there's a reason. He doesn't even have a reason why he did it. Nothing.
Yeah, and
just anger.
Yeah, against babies, which happens more than it should. Yes, it
but
does.
Not like this.
Yeah.
But anyway. So my apologies, but this is the last script that I have for this year.
And then we enter next year, 2023, Jen.
I know.
5
Can you believe
years of podcasting next summer.
Well, I should say this is the last regular script because next, on the 13th of December, we start our Nightmares Before Christmas.
Yes.
So, and that will take you all the way up to the 24th, which is Christmas Eve.
Then you get 12 glorious days and nights with none other than Jen and Cam.
I know. What more can you ask for?
A lot more, Jen. They can ask for a lot more.
I know. But hey, we're okay.
Anywho, all right. Until then, y'all, we'll see you next week. And remember, lock your doors.
And keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya. Today's episode was researched and written by me, Jen. For more information about this episode, as well as all other sources, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by the hosts, Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertese from We Talk of Dreams. You can reach Nico at wetalkofdreams.com. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from Octoberpod VHS. You can find all of his great works on YouTube. Please make sure to like and subscribe to Our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter with the handle at Our True Crime Pod. You can also email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We would also at this time like to thank our patrons. We would be so lost without you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to help support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/Our True Crime Podcast. You can also show your support by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or simply just tell your friends about us. It's that easy. Love ya. And anonymity.
Nope. Try it again.
Anonymity. Anonymity. ANONYMITY.
Oh, no.
What is it then? Anonymous?
It's anonymity. Anonymity, meaning you're anonymous to people. Sorry. Anonymity. Anemia. No, I'm kidding. It's anonymity.
Given an anonymity? Okay, now I see it. See, when you read, you break words up.
I know. Well, and some words are just not meant to be said. Like
I know. Anonymity. And what is it? Now I can't even see it. Say it. Hey, you're laughing at the dyslexic girl, so shut up.
It sounds like Finding Nemo and the plant. What's it called? The anemone? You know what I'm talking about?
Anemone?
Oh, the plant in Finding Nemo. You know the plant that the clownfish hide in?
It's anemone.
There you go. That's the plant. Anonymity is anonymous.
Anonymity. Anonymity. Okay. Are you okay?
No, it struck me funny because then I couldn't say it either. And then I was thinking about the clownfish in Finding Nemo that hide in the anemone. And remember, he can't say it, the little fish. He goes,
I can't say this, did he?
Hold on. I shouldn't be laughing at the serious subject matter. And I'm not. I'm laughing at words are hard. Oh, okay, hold on. Okay.